Welcome back to Legacy Book Insight, where we dive deep into the transformative wisdom found in life-changing literature. Today we're exploring one of the most profound spiritual guides of our time, Eckhart Tolle's masterpiece, The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment. This isn't just another self-help book. This is a complete roadmap to inner transformation, a guide that has awakened millions of readers to a completely different way of experiencing life itself. If you've ever felt trapped by anxiety about the future, haunted by regrets from the past, or simply disconnected from the joy that life has to offer, this exploration will be absolutely revolutionary for you. Tolle's journey to enlightenment began with his own dark night of the soul. At 29, he experienced such intense depression and anxiety that he contemplated ending his own life. But in that moment of deepest despair, something extraordinary happened. A profound shift in consciousness occurred that would not only save his life but eventually touch millions of others around the world. What makes this book so powerful is not just theoretical philosophy. It's a practical manual for escaping the prison of psychological time and discovering the peace, joy, and aliveness that exist in this very moment. The present moment, the only moment that truly exists. Throughout this deep dive, we'll uncover the key principles that can completely transform your relationship with life. We'll explore why the mind creates suffering, how to break free from the ego's endless chatter, and most importantly, how to access the profound peace and joy that are your natural birthright. So settle in, open your mind, and prepare to discover why the present moment isn't just important. It's literally all there is. Let's begin this journey together. Chapter 1. You are not your mind. The first and perhaps most revolutionary insight Tolle offers is this: you are not your mind. For most of us, this statement sounds absurd. Of course we are our minds. Our thoughts, our mental commentary, our endless internal dialogue. Isn't that what makes us who we are? But here's where Tolle challenges everything we think we know about ourselves. He explains that the voice in your head, that constant stream of thoughts, judgments, and mental chatter, is not actually who you are. It's simply a tool like your hand or your foot. The problem is, this tool has taken over and convinced you that it is you. Think about it for a moment. Who is the one observing your thoughts? If you can notice your thinking, if you can step back and watch the mental commentary unfold, then clearly there must be something beyond the mind that's doing the observing. This observer, this aware presence is your true self. Tolle describes the mind as being like a wild horse that's never been trained. It runs wherever it wants, dragging you along for a chaotic and often painful ride. Most people live their entire lives completely identified with this untrained mind, never realizing they have the power to step back and become the observer instead of the victim. The mind loves to create problems. It thrives on drama, conflict, and complexity. Why? Because the mind believes its very survival depends on having problems to solve. Without problems, without constant thinking and analyzing, the mind fears it will cease to exist. So it keeps you trapped in an endless cycle of mental activity, most of which serves no useful purpose whatsoever. This is why you might find yourself lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying conversations from 5 years ago or worrying about scenarios that will probably never happen. The mind is doing what it does best, creating unnecessary suffering through compulsive thinking. But here's the liberating truth Tolle reveals. The moment you recognize that you are not your thoughts, that you can observe them without being controlled by them, you've taken the first crucial step toward freedom. You begin to realize that thoughts are just mental formations that arise and pass away in the space of your awareness, like clouds passing through an empty sky. This awareness, this observer consciousness, is what Tolle calls your essential being. It's peaceful, it's alert, and it exists only in the present moment. Unlike the mind, which is always focused on past or future, your true self exists in the eternal now. The practical application of this insight is profound. Instead of being swept away by every thought and emotion, you can learn to step back and watch them with gentle detachment. You begin to see that most of your mental activity is simply noise, repetitive patterns that serve no real purpose except to keep you distracted from the peace and aliveness of this moment. When you truly grasp that you are not your mind, everything changes. You're no longer at the mercy of your thoughts. You're no longer a victim of your own mental patterns. You become the master of your inner world, capable of accessing a peace and joy that no external circumstance can touch. Chapter 2. Consciousness, the way out of pain. Now that we understand we are not our minds, Tolle introduces us to the transformative power of consciousness. But what exactly does he mean by consciousness? It's not just being awake or aware in the ordinary sense. It's a quality of presence, of alert stillness, that has the power to dissolve even the deepest psychological pain. Most human suffering, according to Tolle, is completely unnecessary. It's created by our resistance to what is happening in the present moment. We suffer not because of what's actually occurring, but because of our thoughts and judgments about what's occurring. We suffer because we want this moment to be different than it is. Consciousness works like light in darkness. The moment you bring conscious awareness to any form of psychological pain, whether it's anxiety, anger, sadness, or fear, something remarkable happens. The pain begins to dissolve. Not because you're trying to fix it or change it, but simply because you're observing it with total acceptance. This might sound too simple to be true, but Tolle explains the mechanism behind this transformation. Psychological pain can only exist when it goes unobserved. It feeds on your unconscious identification with it. The moment you step back and observe the pain without judgment, without trying to analyze or fix it, you're no longer feeding it with your mental energy. Like a fire without fuel, it naturally begins to die out. Think about the last time you felt really angry about something. If you replayed the incident in your mind, adding mental commentary about how wrong the other person was, how unfair the situation was, the anger likely intensified and persisted. But if you had simply observed the feeling of anger in your body without the mental story, without resistance or judgment, what would have happened? The anger would have moved through you naturally and dissolved on its own. This is the power of conscious presence. It doesn't fight against pain or try to escape from it. Instead, it creates space around the pain, allowing it to be there without resistance. And in that space of acceptance, transformation naturally occurs. Tolle also introduces the concept of the pain body, accumulated emotional pain from the past that lives on in your system. This pain body is like a parasite that feeds on negative thinking and emotional drama. It wants you to suffer because that's how it survives and grows stronger. But here's the incredible news. The same consciousness that can dissolve immediate psychological pain can also dissolve years, even decades, of accumulated emotional baggage. When you learn to observe your pain body with conscious awareness, when you stop feeding it with reactive thinking and emotional drama, it begins to lose its power over you. The key is learning to stay present with whatever arises, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Most people have a strong habit of running away from discomfort, either by distracting themselves or by getting lost in mental stories about their problems. But consciousness invites us to stay, to be present, to observe whatever is happening with compassionate awareness. This doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to take appropriate action when needed. It means responding from a place of conscious presence rather than reacting from unconscious patterns of pain and conditioning. When you're truly present, you naturally know what action, if any, needs to be taken. And any action that comes from presence is far more effective than action that comes from a reactive, pain-driven state. The way out of pain, then, is not around it or over it, but through it. Through conscious, accepting presence. This is perhaps one of the most counterintuitive yet liberating truths in Tolle's teaching. Chapter 3. Moving deeply into the now. Understanding the power of now intellectually is one thing. Actually accessing and living from this present moment awareness is something entirely different. Tolle dedicates significant attention to helping us understand what it really means to move deeply into the now, and why this is the most important journey you'll ever take. The present moment is not just a concept or an idea. It's a living reality that you can experience directly. But here's what makes it tricky. The mind cannot understand the now. The mind lives in psychological time, constantly referencing the past or projecting into the future. For the mind, the present moment is just a brief stopping point between past and future, something to be quickly passed through on the way to somewhere else. But reality is quite different. The past exists only as memory traces in your mind. The future exists only as mental projections and possibilities. The only thing that's actually real, the only place where life is actually happening, is right here, right now. This moment is literally all there is. When Tolle talks about moving deeply into the now, he's not suggesting we ignore practical considerations about future planning or learning from the past. He's pointing to a different relationship with time altogether. It's about finding the timeless dimension within this moment, the eternal presence that exists beneath the surface movement of thoughts and experiences. One of the most powerful ways to access this depth of presence is through the body. Unlike the mind, which lives in psychological time, your body always exists in the present moment. You cannot feel your body in the past or future. You can only feel it now. This makes the body a perfect gateway into present moment awareness. Tolle suggests a simple but profound practice. Throughout your day, bring your attention to the inner aliveness of your body. Feel the subtle energy field that animates your physical form. Notice the tingling, the warmth, the sense of life flowing through your hands, your arms, your entire body. This inner aliveness is your connection to the deeper dimension of presence. Another doorway into the now is through what Tolle calls ordinary enlightenment, finding the extraordinary within the ordinary. This might be feeling the texture of an object in your hands with complete attention. It might be listening to the sound of rain with total presence. It might be looking at a flower or a tree with such intensity that the mental commentary stops and you experience pure perception. In these moments of complete presence, something beautiful happens. The sense of separation between you and what you're experiencing dissolves. There's no longer a you observing something separate from yourself. There's just pure experiencing, pure aliveness, pure being. This is what Tolle means by enlightenment. Not some exotic spiritual state, but the simple recognition of your essential nature as conscious presence. The depth of the now is infinite. You can spend a lifetime exploring the richness and aliveness that exists in this moment. The more present you become, the more life reveals its hidden treasures. Colors become more vivid, sounds become more beautiful, even simple activities like walking or breathing become sources of joy and wonder. But moving deeply into the now requires letting go of the mind's addiction to elsewhere. The mind is always trying to take you somewhere else, to some better moment in the future or some more interesting memory from the past. Learning to stay present means learning to recognize these mental invitations to leave the now and gently declining them. This isn't about forcing yourself to stay present or fighting against the mind. It's about cultivating a preference for presence, recognizing that life only happens here and now, and gradually training your attention to rest more and more frequently in this moment. With practice, presence becomes your natural state rather than something you have to work to achieve. The reward for this practice is immense. As you learn to live more deeply in the now, you discover that this moment contains everything you've ever been seeking. Peace, joy, love, fulfillment. They're all here waiting to be recognized in the simple aliveness of this present moment. Chapter 4: Mind Strategies for Avoiding the Now. The mind is incredibly cunning when it comes to avoiding the present moment. It has developed sophisticated strategies over thousands of years of human evolution to keep us focused anywhere except right here, right now. Understanding these strategies is crucial for breaking free from their grip and learning to live with greater presence and peace. One of the mind's favorite tactics is what Tolle calls psychological time. This is different from clock time, which we use for practical purposes like catching a plane or arriving at an appointment. Psychological time is the mind's way of making the past and future seem more real and important than the present moment. The mind loves to dwell in the past, either through nostalgic romanticizing or through resentment and regret. How much of your mental energy gets consumed by replaying old conversations, reliving past hurts, or wishing you had done something differently? This is the mind's way of avoiding the aliveness and immediacy of now. Equally compelling is the mind's fascination with the future. It creates elaborate fantasies about how life will be better when certain conditions are met. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be at peace when I retire. Everything will be perfect when I find the right relationship. This is perhaps the mind's most seductive trap, the illusion that fulfillment lies somewhere in the future. But here's what Tolle reveals about this future-focused thinking. The future never actually arrives. When what you thought was the future becomes the present, your mind simply projects fulfillment into a new future moment. The carrot is always dangling just out of reach, keeping you in a perpetual state of seeking and never finding. Another common strategy is what we might call problem addiction. The mind loves problems because they give it a sense of purpose and identity. Without problems to solve or analyze, the mind fears it will become obsolete. So it creates problems where none exist, or takes small challenges and turns them into major dramas worthy of endless mental attention. Notice how the mind works with relationships. Instead of simply enjoying the person who's actually in front of you right now, the mind is busy analyzing, judging, comparing, planning, or worrying about the relationship. It might be thinking about what the person said yesterday, or worrying about what they might do tomorrow, or comparing them to other people you've known. Meanwhile, the actual living person right in front of you is completely missed. The mind also uses emotional drama as a way to avoid the simplicity of presence. It's much more exciting to be caught up in righteous anger, romantic fantasy, or victim stories than to simply be peacefully present. Drama feels important, feels significant, gives the mind something to chew on. Presence, by contrast, might initially feel boring to a mind that's addicted to stimulation and complexity. Shopping, entertainment, and social media have become particularly effective ways for the modern mind to avoid the present moment. They provide endless streams of stimulation and distraction, keeping our attention always focused on the next purchase, the next episode, the next notification. The mind becomes like a drug addict, always needing the next hit of external stimulation to avoid the perceived emptiness of simply being present. But perhaps the mind's most subtle strategy is spiritual seeking itself. The mind can turn even the search for presence into another form of avoidance. It creates elaborate spiritual concepts and practices, always seeking some future state of enlightenment or awakening. Even reading about presence or listening to teachings can become a way of avoiding actually being present right now. Recognizing these strategies doesn't mean judging them or trying to forcefully stop them. The moment you bring conscious awareness to these patterns, they naturally begin to lose their power over you. You start to see them as just habits of the mind, not truths about reality. And in that recognition, you create space to choose presence instead of automatically following the mind's invitations to elsewhere. The key is developing what Tolle calls the watcher, the part of you that can observe the mind's strategies without getting caught up in them. When you notice your mind trying to take you into psychological time or problem addiction or emotional drama, you can simply acknowledge it with a gentle, "Ah, there's the mind doing its thing," and bring your attention back to the aliveness of this moment. Remember, the mind isn't your enemy. It's simply doing what it's been conditioned to do over thousands of years. But you no longer have to be its victim. You can learn to use the mind as a tool when needed, while resting your identity in the conscious presence that you truly are. Chapter 5. The State of Presence. What exactly is this state of presence that Tolle speaks of so often? How do we recognize it, cultivate it, and live from it? This might be the most practical and transformative section of our entire exploration, because understanding the state of presence is the key to unlocking everything else Tolle teaches. Presence is not something you do or achieve. It's something you are. It's your natural state when the mind's constant chatter settles and you connect with the aliveness and awareness that you fundamentally are. Think of it like the sky. Thoughts and emotions are like clouds that pass through, but the sky itself remains clear, spacious, and unchanged. In the state of presence, there's a quality of alert stillness. You're not spaced out or absent. You're more alert and aware than usual, but without the mental noise and agitation that typically accompanies heightened awareness. It's like being in a state of relaxed attention, completely here but without strain or effort. One of the most beautiful aspects of presence is its inherent peace. This isn't the peace that comes from getting what you want or avoiding what you don't want. It's a deeper peace that exists independent of external circumstances. It's the peace of simply being without needing anything to be different than it is. This peace is always available, right underneath the surface movement of thoughts and emotions. In presence, there's also a natural joy or aliveness. Not the excitement that depends on external stimulation, but a quiet joy that comes from connecting with the life force itself. Some people describe this as feeling more real or authentic than usual. Colors might appear more vivid, sounds more beautiful, simple sensations more interesting. This is because you're experiencing life directly rather than through the filter of mental commentary. Presence also brings a natural compassion and love. When you're not caught up in the ego's endless needs and judgments, your heart naturally opens. You see other people more clearly, without the projections and expectations that usually cloud your perception. Relationships become easier and more genuine because you're responding to what's actually here rather than to your mental stories about what's here. But how do we cultivate this state? Tolle offers several practical approaches. One of the most accessible is through what he calls conscious breathing. This doesn't mean controlling your breath, but simply becoming aware of it. Notice the breath coming in, notice the breath going out. Don't try to change anything, just observe. The breath is always happening now, so paying attention to it naturally brings you into the present moment. Another powerful gateway is through the body's inner aliveness. Take a moment right now to feel the life energy in your hands. You might notice tingling, warmth, or just a subtle sense of presence. This inner aliveness is always available, and focusing on it immediately connects you with the present moment. You can extend this awareness throughout your entire body, feeling yourself from the inside out. Presence can also be cultivated through what Tolle calls ordinary enlightenment, bringing complete attention to simple, everyday activities. Washing dishes becomes a meditation when you feel the warm water, notice the texture of the soap, experience the simple satisfaction of cleaning something. Walking becomes a spiritual practice when you feel your feet touching the ground, notice the rhythm of your steps, experience the miracle of movement through space. The key is learning to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, recognizing that every moment offers an opportunity to connect with presence. You don't need special circumstances or peak experiences. Presence is equally available while sitting in traffic, standing in line at the grocery store, or having a difficult conversation with a family member. One of the most important things to understand about presence is that it's not a destination you reach and then stay in permanently. It's more like a muscle that gets stronger with practice. Throughout your day, you'll inevitably get pulled into mental commentary, emotional reactions, and unconscious patterns. This is completely normal and nothing to judge. The practice is simply noticing when you've been pulled away from presence and gently returning your attention to this moment. Over time, you'll find that you naturally spend more and more time in presence. It becomes your default state rather than something you have to work to access. And in that state, you discover that you already have everything you've been seeking. Peace, joy, love, fulfillment. They're all here in the simple aliveness of this present moment. The state of presence isn't just a nice feeling or a temporary escape from life's challenges. It's actually the most practical and effective way to live. From presence, you see situations more clearly, respond more appropriately, and take action that's aligned with what the moment actually requires. Presence doesn't make you passive or detached from life. It makes you more engaged with life, but from a place of peace and clarity rather than from reactive patterns of fear and desire. Chapter 6. The Inner Body. One of Tolle's most practical and immediately accessible teachings involves what he calls the inner body. This isn't some esoteric concept, but a direct, felt experience that every person can access right now. The inner body represents your connection to the present moment through the physical sensations and life energy that animate your form. Most of the time, we relate to our bodies from the outside. How we look, how we appear to others, whether we're too fat or too thin, too tall or too short. We treat the body like an object, something we have rather than something we are. But Tolle invites us to experience the body from the inside, to feel the subtle aliveness that flows through every cell. This inner aliveness is not just a physical sensation. It's your connection to the universal life force, what some traditions call chi or prana. When you feel your body from within, you're actually feeling life itself as it expresses through your particular form. This is why connecting with the inner body is so powerful. It immediately grounds you in the present moment and connects you with something much larger than your individual identity. Try this simple exercise. Close your eyes and bring your attention to your hands. Don't think about your hands, but actually feel them from the inside. You might notice tingling, warmth, a sense of aliveness or presence. This is your inner body. Now expand this awareness to your arms, your torso, your legs. Feel the life energy that animates your entire form. This isn't imagination or visualization. It's direct perception of the life force that you actually are. The more you practice this, the more sensitive you become to this inner aliveness. Some people describe it as a subtle electricity, others as a warm presence, others as a field of energy. The exact sensation doesn't matter. What matters is learning to rest your attention in this felt sense of being alive. The inner body is always present moment-oriented. You cannot feel your inner body in the past or future. It exists only now. This makes it a perfect anchor for present moment awareness. Whenever you notice your mind getting caught up in psychological time, you can immediately return to presence by feeling your body from within. This practice becomes especially powerful during challenging situations. When you're feeling anxious, angry, or overwhelmed, instead of getting lost in the mental story about why you feel this way, you can bring your attention to the inner body. Feel the life energy that remains peaceful and stable even when emotions are turbulent on the surface. This doesn't suppress or avoid the emotions, but it gives you a stable foundation from which to experience them without being overwhelmed. The inner body also serves as an early warning system for unconscious reactivity. Before you lose your temper or make a decision you'll later regret, there are usually physical sensations that signal rising unconsciousness. Tension in the shoulders, tightness in the chest, a clenched jaw. When you're connected to your inner body, you notice these signals and can choose to respond rather than react. Many people discover that connecting with the inner body has healing effects. This makes sense when you understand that many physical problems are connected to chronic tension, stress, and unconscious emotional patterns. When you bring conscious awareness to the body's energy field, you're allowing life force to flow more freely, which naturally supports health and vitality. The practice of inner body awareness can be done anywhere, anytime. You don't need to sit in meditation or create special circumstances. You can feel your inner body while walking, working, talking with others, or engaged in any activity. In fact, bringing this awareness to everyday activities transforms them into opportunities for presence and aliveness. Over time, as you become more familiar with your inner body, you may notice that this aliveness extends beyond the boundaries of your physical form. The energy field that you feel as your body is actually part of a larger field of consciousness that connects all life. In deep states of inner body awareness, the sense of separation between self and world may dissolve, revealing the interconnected nature of all existence. This isn't just a pleasant experience, it's a direct recognition of your true nature. You begin to realize that you're not just a separate individual struggling through life, but a unique expression of the same consciousness that animates all of existence. The inner body, then, becomes not just a tool for present moment awareness, but a gateway to recognizing the spiritual dimension of your being. The beauty of this teaching is its simplicity and immediacy. You don't need years of spiritual practice or special knowledge to access your inner body. It's here right now, waiting to be felt. And in feeling it, you discover that you already have direct access to the peace, aliveness, and connection that you've been seeking. Chapter 7: Portals into the Unmanifested. Beyond the world of form, beyond thoughts and emotions and physical sensations, Tolle points to what he calls the unmanifested, the source from which all manifestation arises and to which it returns. This isn't just a philosophical concept, but a dimension of being that you can actually experience directly. And remarkably, there are specific portals through which you can access this deeper reality. The unmanifested is the formless essence that underlies all form. Think of it like the silence that exists between musical notes, the space that contains all objects, the stillness from which all movement emerges. It's not empty nothingness, but rather pregnant with infinite potential. It's what mystics throughout history have called by many names: the void, the absolute, pure consciousness, God. But why is it important to access this dimension? Because connecting with the unmanifested provides the deepest possible foundation for your life. Instead of deriving your identity and security from the constantly changing world of form, your thoughts, emotions, circumstances, relationships, you begin to rest in something that's eternally stable and peaceful. You discover what Tolle calls your immortal essence. The most accessible portal into the unmanifested is through the space between thoughts. Notice this right now. Between one thought and the next, there's a gap, a moment of stillness. This gap is not empty. It's full of conscious presence. It's the same awareness from which thoughts arise and into which they disappear. Learning to rest in this space between thoughts is like discovering the source of your own being. Another powerful portal is through what Tolle calls the space around objects. Look at any object near you right now. Notice not just the object itself, but the space that surrounds it. This space isn't just physical emptiness. It's conscious space, aware space. As you learn to perceive space as consciously as you perceive objects, you begin to access the formless dimension of your being. Sleep offers another natural portal into the unmanifested. Every night, your individual identity dissolves into formless consciousness. You're still there, awareness is still present, but the ego with all its problems and stories temporarily disappears. Deep, dreamless sleep is actually a state of consciousness, just without an object of awareness. Learning to remain conscious during the transition into sleep can provide profound insights into your essential nature. The portal of surrender is particularly powerful during challenging situations. When you completely accept what is, when you stop resisting the present moment regardless of what it contains, something remarkable happens. The mental-emotional reaction that was creating suffering simply dissolves, and you find yourself in a space of peace that exists independent of circumstances. This peace is a taste of the unmanifested. Meditation, when practiced correctly, is essentially the art of accessing the unmanifested. But Tolle's approach to meditation is refreshingly simple. It's not about achieving special states or having mystical experiences. It's about learning to rest in the formless awareness that you already are. Whether you focus on your breath, a mantra, or simply rest in open awareness, the goal is always the same: to dissolve the sense of separation between the observer and the observed and rest in pure being. Perhaps the most surprising portal is death itself. Not physical death, but the psychological death of the ego that can occur in any moment. When you completely let go of your mental image of yourself, when you stop defending or promoting your personal story, when you become nobody in particular, that's when you discover who you really are. This ego death isn't frightening when you realize that what dies was never real in the first place, and what remains is infinitely more beautiful and alive. The space of not knowing also serves as a portal. When you admit that you don't know something, when you become comfortable with uncertainty, when you stop pretending to have all the answers, you create an opening for deeper wisdom to emerge. The mind hates not knowing, but consciousness is perfectly at home in the mystery of existence. Even waiting can become a portal when approached consciously. Instead of filling waiting time with mental activity or becoming impatient, you can use these moments to simply be present. Feel your inner body, notice your breath, rest in the awareness that's always here. Waiting rooms, traffic jams, and delayed appointments become opportunities to access the timeless dimension of your being. What's remarkable about these portals is that they're available in the most ordinary circumstances. You don't need to go to a monastery or have peak spiritual experiences. The unmanifested is closer than your breath, more intimate than your thoughts. It's the very ground of your being, the consciousness in which all experience arises and passes away. As you begin to access the unmanifested more frequently, something profound shifts in your life. You're no longer completely dependent on external circumstances for your sense of well-being. You have an inner anchor, a connection to something that no external situation can touch. This doesn't make you passive or disconnected from the world of form. Instead, it allows you to engage more fully with life because you're no longer desperately seeking fulfillment from experiences that are inherently temporary. The unmanifested isn't separate from the manifested world. It's the very essence of what you see, hear, touch, and experience. Learning to perceive the formless within form, the eternal within time, the unchanging within constant change. This is the direct path to what spiritual traditions call enlightenment or liberation. Chapter 8. Enlightened Relationships. Perhaps nowhere is the power of present moment awareness more transformative than in our relationships with others. Most relationship problems stem not from incompatibility or external circumstances, but from unconscious patterns of ego-based interaction. When both people are identified with their minds and pain bodies, relationships become battlegrounds of competing needs, expectations, and emotional reactions. But what does an enlightened relationship look like? It's not a relationship between two perfect people who never have conflicts. It's a relationship where at least one person, and ideally both, are committed to presence rather than unconscious reactivity. It's a relationship where love flows naturally because there's space for the other person to be exactly who they are without constant judgment, manipulation, or attempts at change. The foundation of enlightened relationships is accepting the other person completely in this moment. This doesn't mean approving of all their behaviors or failing to communicate your needs. It means seeing them as they actually are right now, rather than through the filter of your mental expectations about who they should be. Most relationship suffering comes from loving our idea of a person rather than the actual person standing in front of us. Tolle reveals that the ego has a very different agenda in relationships than love does. The ego seeks to use relationships to strengthen its own identity, to get its needs met, to feel special or important or secure. The ego doesn't actually love the other person. It loves what the other person does for its own sense of self. This is why ego-based relationships are inherently unstable and conflict-prone. True love, on the other hand, recognizes the being in the other person. It sees beyond their personality, their moods, their temporary states and conditions. It connects with the consciousness that they are, the same consciousness that you are. From this recognition, natural care and compassion flow without effort or strain. One of the biggest obstacles to enlightened relationships is what Tolle calls the pain body. This is accumulated emotional pain from past relationships and experiences that gets triggered in current interactions. When your pain body is activated, you're not really responding to the person in front of you. You're responding to old wounds, old patterns, old stories. The other person becomes a screen onto which you project past hurts and fears. Learning to recognize when your pain body is activated is crucial for conscious relationships. There are usually physical signs: tension in the body, emotional intensity that seems disproportionate to the current situation, a compulsive need to defend or attack. When you notice these signals, you can pause, feel your inner body, and choose to respond from presence rather than react from past conditioning. Equally important is learning to recognize when the other person's pain body is active. Instead of taking their reactivity personally or responding with your own pain body, you can remain present and refuse to feed the unconscious pattern. This doesn't mean being passive or failing to set appropriate boundaries. It means responding to their pain with compassion rather than adding more pain to the situation. Arguments and conflicts in enlightened relationships serve a different purpose than in unconscious relationships. Instead of being opportunities to prove who's right or to defend the ego's position, they become opportunities to deepen understanding and intimacy. When you argue from presence, you're not trying to win. You're trying to understand what's really going on beneath the surface disagreement. The practice of conscious communication is essential. This means speaking from your truth without attacking the other person, listening without preparing your defensive response, and staying present with whatever emotions arise without immediately acting them out. It means being honest about your own experience while creating space for the other person's experience to be different. Sexual intimacy in enlightened relationships transcends the ego's agenda of possession and performance. It becomes a celebration of the life force itself, a recognition of the divine in physical form, a temporary dissolution of the sense of separation between self and other. Instead of using sexuality to meet psychological needs or boost the ego, it becomes an expression of love and aliveness. Perhaps most importantly, enlightened relationships don't depend on the other person for your happiness or sense of completeness. You enter the relationship already whole, already at peace, already fulfilled. This creates space for genuine love to flourish because you're not desperately seeking something from the other person that only you can give yourself. This doesn't make relationships less important or meaningful. Actually, it makes them more beautiful because they're based on sharing rather than seeking, on celebrating rather than using, on loving rather than needing. When two conscious beings come together, they create a field of presence that's greater than the sum of its parts. They support each other's awakening rather than enabling each other's unconsciousness. The journey toward enlightened relationships often begins with healing your relationship with yourself. How can you give someone else the space to be who they are if you don't give yourself that same space? How can you love another person unconditionally if you're constantly judging and criticizing yourself? The relationship with others becomes a mirror of the relationship with yourself. This is why Tolle emphasizes that the most important relationship is the one you have with the present moment. When you're at peace with what is, when you're not constantly wanting this moment to be different, you naturally bring that same accepting presence to your relationships. Others feel safe to be authentic around you because they're not being constantly evaluated and judged. Chapter 9. Beyond Happiness and Unhappiness. Most people spend their entire lives in pursuit of happiness and avoidance of unhappiness. This seems natural, even sensible. But Tolle reveals something profound. This very pursuit is what keeps us trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction and prevents us from accessing the deeper joy and peace that are our birthright. Happiness, as most people understand it, depends on external circumstances aligning with our preferences. We're happy when we get what we want and unhappy when we don't. This creates what Tolle calls the pendulum effect, swinging back and forth between the highs of getting what we want and the lows of experiencing what we don't want. Neither state is permanent, and neither provides lasting fulfillment. The problem with seeking happiness is that it keeps you trapped in psychological time. Happiness is always projected into the future. I'll be happy when I get that promotion, when I find the right relationship, when I lose weight, when I retire. But when those future moments arrive, if they bring the expected happiness at all, it's temporary. Soon the mind is projecting happiness into yet another future scenario. But beyond this pendulum of happiness and unhappiness lies something much more stable and fulfilling. Tolle calls it joy, peace, or simply aliveness. Unlike happiness, which depends on external circumstances, this deeper joy arises naturally when you're fully present with what is. It's not the opposite of unhappiness, it's a different dimension altogether. This joy doesn't depend on getting anything or avoiding anything. It's the joy of simply being alive, of being conscious, of existing in this miraculous moment. It's what you might feel watching a sunset with complete presence, or holding a baby, or listening to beautiful music with total attention. In these moments, you're not thinking about whether you're happy or unhappy. You're simply alive and aware, and that aliveness itself is joyful. The key to accessing this deeper dimension is acceptance of what is. This doesn't mean passive resignation or failing to take appropriate action when needed. It means saying yes to this moment exactly as it is, without the mental resistance that creates suffering. When you stop fighting against what's happening, when you relax into the present moment regardless of its content, you discover that the moment itself has a quality of aliveness and beauty that exists independent of whether you like what's happening or not. Tolle shares a powerful insight about emotions. Pain is inevitable in human life. Bodies get injured, loved ones die, circumstances sometimes don't align with our preferences. But suffering is optional. Suffering is pain plus resistance. Pain plus the mental story about how things shouldn't be this way, pain plus the projection into future scenarios based on current difficulties. When you experience pain without resistance, something remarkable happens. The pain moves through you naturally and completely, like weather moving through the sky. It doesn't get stuck, doesn't become a problem to solve, doesn't create a story about your life or your future. It's simply a temporary experience arising in the space of your awareness. This principle applies to all forms of emotional pain. Sadness, anger, fear, disappointment. These are natural human experiences. But when you observe them with conscious presence rather than getting lost in mental stories about them, they transform from problems into simple energy movements in your awareness. They may still be uncomfortable, but they're no longer sources of psychological suffering. The practice is learning to find what Tolle calls the space around your experiences. Whether you're experiencing something pleasant or unpleasant, there's always aware space in which the experience is happening. This space is inherently peaceful and free. Learning to identify with this aware space rather than with the content of experience is the key to transcending the happiness-unhappiness cycle. This doesn't make you indifferent or emotionally numb. Actually, it makes you more sensitive and responsive because you're not protecting yourself from life's natural movements. You become like a clear lake that reflects everything perfectly: the beautiful sunset and the storm clouds, the visiting birds and the fallen leaves. The lake isn't damaged by any of these reflections because it doesn't resist them or cling to them. From this space of acceptance, life becomes much simpler. You're no longer constantly evaluating your experiences as good or bad, trying to hold on to the pleasant and push away the unpleasant. You can respond appropriately to situations without the additional layer of emotional drama that resistance creates. You can feel sadness without the story that you shouldn't be sad. You can experience challenges without the additional suffering of believing that challenges shouldn't exist. This is what Tolle means by going beyond happiness and unhappiness. It's not about becoming emotionless or detached from life. It's about discovering a deeper ground of being that remains stable and peaceful regardless of what's happening on the surface of experience. From this ground, you can fully engage with life while remaining inwardly free. The beautiful paradox is that when you stop chasing happiness, you discover that joy is your natural state. When you stop running from unhappiness, you realize that even difficult experiences can't touch your essential well-being. Life becomes a dance rather than a struggle, an exploration rather than a desperate search for something missing. Chapter 10: The Meaning of Surrender. Surrender is perhaps one of the most misunderstood concepts in spiritual teaching. To many people, surrender sounds like giving up, becoming passive, or allowing others to walk all over you. But Tolle reveals that true surrender is actually the most powerful position you can take in any situation. It's the source of all real strength, wisdom, and effective action. What does Tolle mean by surrender? He means complete acceptance of what is in this moment. Not acceptance of unacceptable behavior from others, not failure to take appropriate action when needed, but acceptance of the fact that this moment is as it is. Whatever is happening right now has already happened. Resistance to what has already occurred is not only futile but creates unnecessary psychological suffering. Think about the last time you were stuck in traffic when you needed to be somewhere important. You had two choices: resist the situation and create internal stress and agitation, or accept the situation and respond from a place of peace and clarity. The traffic was the same either way, but your inner experience was completely different depending on whether you chose resistance or surrender. Surrender doesn't mean you don't take action. It means you take action from presence rather than from resistance. When you surrender to being stuck in traffic, you might find a different route, call ahead to let people know you'll be late, or use the time to practice presence. These actions come from clarity and wisdom rather than from stress and reactivity. The ego fears surrender because it believes surrender means death. In a sense, this is true. Surrender is the death of the ego's illusion of control. The ego wants to believe that it can and should control life, that resistance to unwanted circumstances will somehow change them. But life is much larger and more intelligent than the individual ego. Fighting against the flow of life is like a wave trying to resist the ocean. True surrender reveals that you are not separate from the intelligence that governs all of life. When you align yourself with this intelligence through acceptance of what is, you tap into a power that's much greater than your individual will. Solutions appear, opportunities arise, and actions emerge that you never could have planned or forced through ego effort. Tolle distinguishes between surrender and submission. Submission is giving in to someone else's ego demands, often from a place of fear or weakness. Surrender is aligning yourself with the intelligence of the present moment, which sometimes requires saying no to others' inappropriate demands. Surrender actually gives you the strength to set healthy boundaries because you're responding from presence rather than reacting from fear. One of the most powerful applications of surrender is in dealing with difficult people. When someone is being unconscious, reactive, or even abusive, your first instinct might be to fight back or defend yourself. But surrender offers a different approach. You accept that this person is unconscious in this moment, that their behavior is coming from their own pain and conditioning. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse, but you respond from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. When you surrender to difficult people, you often discover that your non-resistance disarms their aggression. They were expecting a fight, a power struggle, and when you don't provide resistance, their attack energy has nothing to push against. This can create space for a completely different kind of interaction to emerge. Surrender is also the key to healing, both physical and emotional. When you resist illness or emotional pain, you add a layer of psychological suffering to whatever physical or emotional discomfort you're experiencing. But when you surrender to the experience, when you allow it to be there without making it wrong, the natural intelligence of your body and psyche can work more effectively to restore balance. This doesn't mean being passive about health issues or failing to seek appropriate medical care. It means not adding the extra burden of resistance to whatever healing process is already underway. Many people discover that when they stop fighting their illness and start accepting their current condition, their body's natural healing mechanisms work more efficiently. Perhaps the deepest level of surrender is surrendering the very desire for enlightenment or spiritual attainment. The ego can turn even the spiritual search into another form of seeking, another way of trying to get somewhere other than here, become someone other than who you are now. True surrender means being completely okay with your current level of consciousness, your current life circumstances, your current challenges and limitations. Paradoxically, this surrender to what is often catalyzes the very transformation that seeking could never achieve. When you're no longer trying to become awakened, you may discover that awareness itself is your natural state. When you stop trying to fix your life, you may find that life begins to flow more harmoniously on its own. The practice of surrender can begin with small things. Surrender to the weather instead of complaining about it. Surrender to slow internet instead of getting frustrated. Surrender to your partner's mood instead of trying to change it. As you practice with these minor situations, you build the capacity for surrender in more challenging circumstances. Surrender is not a one-time event but a moment-to-moment choice. Throughout your day, you'll be presented with opportunities to choose acceptance or resistance, surrender or control. Each time you choose surrender, you align yourself more deeply with the intelligence of life itself. Each time you choose resistance, you create unnecessary friction and suffering. The ultimate surrender is the recognition that there is no separate self to surrender. What you thought was your individual will choosing to surrender to life is revealed to be life surrendering to itself, consciousness recognizing its own nature, the wave realizing it was always the ocean. Chapter 11. Transforming illness and suffering. Illness and physical suffering present some of life's greatest challenges to maintaining presence and inner peace. When the body is in pain, when energy is low, when medical diagnoses bring fear about the future, it can feel impossible to access the peace and joy that Tolle speaks of. Yet he offers profound insights into how illness can actually become a doorway to deeper spiritual awakening. The first principle Tolle teaches is the crucial difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens in the body, physical sensations, discomfort, the actual experience of illness or injury. Suffering is what happens in the mind, the story about the pain, the resistance to the experience, the projection of current difficulties into future scenarios, the mental complaint that this shouldn't be happening. When you have a headache, the actual physical sensation might be unpleasant, but it's manageable. What makes it unbearable is often the mental layer. This is ruining my day. I can't function like this. What if this gets worse? The physical pain gets amplified by psychological suffering, creating a much more intense overall experience of distress. But here's the remarkable discovery many people make when they begin to separate pain from suffering. The physical sensation, when experienced without mental resistance, is just sensation. It arises in awareness, exists for a time, and eventually passes away. It doesn't threaten your essential being any more than a storm threatens the sky through which it moves. This doesn't mean pretending that pain doesn't hurt or that illness isn't challenging. It means bringing conscious presence to the experience rather than adding layers of mental drama. When you feel pain in the body, instead of immediately thinking about what it means or how to get rid of it, you can simply observe it with the same present moment awareness you might bring to watching clouds or listening to music. Tolle suggests a powerful practice for working with physical discomfort. Instead of focusing on the area of pain, bring your attention to the parts of your body that feel normal or even pleasant. Feel the aliveness in your hands, your arms, parts of your torso that aren't experiencing distress. This reminds you that your identity is not limited to the area of discomfort. You are the conscious space in which both comfort and discomfort arise. Serious illness often forces people into the present moment in a way that nothing else can. When you're dealing with cancer, heart disease, or other life-threatening conditions, the mind's usual preoccupations with past and future seem less important. This can create an opening for a deeper appreciation of life, a recognition of what really matters, a connection with the preciousness of each moment. Many people report that serious illness, while initially devastating, eventually became a catalyst for spiritual awakening. Faced with their own mortality, they stopped taking life for granted. Relationships became more important than achievements. Simple experiences like breathing, walking, or sharing a meal became sources of profound gratitude and joy. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires a conscious choice to use illness as a spiritual teacher rather than simply as an enemy to fight. It means asking not just, how can I get rid of this? But what might this experience be trying to teach me? It means looking for the gifts hidden within the challenge, even while taking appropriate medical action. Tolle also addresses the role of stress and unconscious emotional patterns in creating physical illness. The body holds the accumulated stress of years of unconscious living. The tension from constant mental activity, the inflammation from chronic worry, the immune suppression from persistent anxiety. When you learn to live more presently, when you dissolve the psychological suffering that often accompanies physical challenges, you remove a significant burden from your body's healing systems. This doesn't mean that all illness is caused by psychological factors or that presence alone will cure every condition. But it does mean that presence can significantly improve your relationship with illness and may support your body's natural healing mechanisms. At the very least, it ensures that you don't add unnecessary psychological suffering to whatever physical challenges you're facing. The practice of feeling your inner body becomes especially important during illness. Even when parts of your body are diseased or damaged, the underlying life force that animates your form remains intact. Connecting with this inner aliveness reminds you that your essential being is larger than any particular physical condition. You are not your illness any more than you are your thoughts or emotions. For those dealing with chronic conditions, presence becomes a way of life rather than a temporary practice. You learn to find peace not by escaping your condition but by changing your relationship to it. You discover that it's possible to be at peace even while experiencing physical limitations. Quality of life becomes more about inner state than external circumstances. Perhaps most importantly, illness can teach surrender at the deepest level. When medical treatments aren't working as hoped, when the body isn't responding as expected, when control over health is clearly limited, you're invited to surrender to something larger than your individual will. This surrender isn't giving up, but aligning yourself with the intelligence that governs all of life, including the processes of illness and healing. In this surrender, many people discover a peace that surpasses understanding, a sense of being held by something much larger and more loving than they ever imagined. They realize that even if physical healing doesn't occur as hoped, there's a deeper healing available, the healing of the separation between the individual self and the totality of life. Illness, then, becomes not just a physical challenge to be overcome, but a spiritual invitation to go deeper into presence, acceptance, and trust. It can strip away everything non-essential and reveal what truly matters, what remains when everything changeable falls away. In this way, what initially appears as life's cruelest challenge can become its greatest gift. Chapter 12, Living in Presence, the Practical Path. Understanding the principles of presence intellectually is one thing. Actually living from this awareness throughout your daily life is another challenge entirely. How do you maintain connection with the present moment while navigating responsibilities, relationships, and the countless demands of modern life? Tolle offers practical guidance for integrating presence into every aspect of your existence. The foundation of living in presence is what Tolle calls ordinary enlightenment. You don't need peak spiritual experiences or mystical states to access the transformative power of now. Enlightenment is available in the most mundane activities. Washing dishes, walking to your car, having a conversation with a coworker. The key is bringing total attention to whatever you're doing, regardless of how simple or routine it might seem. Take something as basic as drinking a cup of tea. Most of the time, we drink while thinking about something else entirely, barely noticing the taste, temperature, or sensation. But when you bring complete presence to this simple act, it becomes a meditation. You notice the warmth of the cup in your hands, the aroma rising with the steam, the complex flavors on your tongue, the satisfaction of warmth spreading through your body. What was once unconscious routine becomes a doorway into aliveness and appreciation. This principle applies to every activity. Walking becomes a celebration of movement and balance when you feel your feet touching the ground with each step. Listening to music becomes a direct experience of beauty when you're not simultaneously thinking about your to-do list. Even waiting in line at the store becomes an opportunity to practice presence rather than mental time travel. One of the most practical applications is in your work life. Many people feel that presence is impossible during busy workdays filled with deadlines, meetings, and competing demands. But this is exactly when presence is most valuable and most needed. When you approach work tasks from presence rather than anxiety, you think more clearly, make better decisions, and communicate more effectively. The practice is learning to do one thing at a time with complete attention. Instead of multitasking your way through the day in a state of chronic distraction, you focus fully on whatever task is in front of you. When you're writing an email, you're completely present with writing that email. When you're in a meeting, you're fully there rather than planning your next activity. This focused attention is more efficient than scattered multitasking and far less stressful. Dealing with challenging people becomes much easier from presence. When someone is being difficult, unconscious, or even aggressive, your habitual response might be to become reactive yourself. But presence gives you space to respond rather than react. You can listen to what they're actually saying beneath their emotional charge. You can respond to their underlying need rather than their surface behavior. Often, your calm presence helps to de-escalate situations that would otherwise spiral into conflict. Technology presents unique challenges to living in presence. Smartphones, social media, and constant connectivity can keep us perpetually distracted from the present moment. But these same technologies can be used consciously. Instead of mindlessly scrolling through feeds, you can use technology as a tool for specific purposes and then put it away. You can create spaces in your day that are completely free from digital distraction. The practice of conscious breathing becomes especially important in our fast-paced world. Your breath is always available as an anchor to the present moment. In stressful situations, instead of getting caught up in mental drama, you can take 3 conscious breaths and immediately reconnect with presence. This simple practice can transform your entire day. Relationships become much more fulfilling when you bring presence to your interactions with others. Instead of thinking about what you're going to say next while someone is talking, you listen completely. Instead of interacting with your mental image of who someone is, you meet the actual person in front of you in this moment. This quality of attention is one of the greatest gifts you can offer another person. Parenting from presence is particularly transformative. Children naturally live in the present moment until they're taught to do otherwise. When you interact with children from presence rather than from your adult mental preoccupations, you meet them in their natural state of aliveness and wonder. This not only improves your relationship with them but helps preserve their natural connection to the present moment. Even mundane activities like household chores become opportunities for presence. Cleaning becomes a meditation when you feel the physical movements, notice the transformation from dirty to clean, appreciate the care you're bringing to your living space. Cooking becomes creative expression when you're fully present with the colors, textures, and aromas of the ingredients. The key is recognizing that there are no unimportant moments, no activities that are beneath the attention of presence. Every moment offers an opportunity to be awake, to be alive, to connect with the miracle of existence. The person who can find profound meaning in washing dishes has discovered something more valuable than any external achievement. As you practice living in presence, you may notice that life begins to flow more effortlessly. Instead of constantly struggling against circumstances, you find yourself moving with the natural rhythm of events. Problems still arise, but you address them from clarity and wisdom rather than from anxiety and reactivity. Opportunities appear that you never would have noticed while caught up in mental preoccupations. Perhaps most importantly, you discover that you already have everything you've been seeking. The peace, joy, and fulfillment you thought you needed to acquire from future experiences or external achievements are revealed to be your natural state when you're fully present. Life itself, exactly as it is right now, becomes the source of deep satisfaction and wonder. This is the ultimate practical teaching of the power of now. That ordinary life, lived with extraordinary presence, is the most direct path to the extraordinary. You don't need to go anywhere, become anyone different, or wait for better circumstances. The doorway to awakening is here, in this moment, in whatever you're experiencing right now. The transformation of human consciousness. As we reach the end of our journey through Eckhart Tolle's profound teachings, it's important to understand that the power of now, is not just a book about personal improvement or individual spiritual awakening. It's pointing to something much larger: the transformation of human consciousness itself and your role in this planetary shift. Tolle suggests that humanity is at a crucial evolutionary juncture. For thousands of years, human civilization has been driven primarily by what he calls ego consciousness, identification with thought, seeking fulfillment through external means, creating separation between self and other, living predominantly in psychological time rather than present moment awareness. This ego-driven consciousness has created remarkable technological achievements, but it's also created war, environmental destruction, and epidemic levels of psychological suffering. Your personal awakening is not separate from this larger evolutionary movement. When you learn to live from presence rather than from compulsive thinking, when you discover peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, when you recognize the being in other people beyond their personality and behavior patterns, you become part of the solution to humanity's fundamental problems. This doesn't mean you need to become a spiritual teacher or change your career or lifestyle dramatically. The transformation happens through how you live your ordinary life. A parent who interacts with their children from presence rather than unconscious reactivity is contributing to the raising of a more conscious generation. A business person who makes decisions from awareness rather than from greed and fear is helping to create more ethical and sustainable economic systems. A friend who listens with total presence is offering healing to a world that desperately needs authentic human connection. The teachings in The Power of Now are ultimately about freedom. Freedom from the mental prisons that keep us trapped in unnecessary suffering. Freedom from the compulsive patterns that prevent us from experiencing the joy and aliveness that are our birthright. Freedom to respond to life from wisdom and compassion rather than from fear and unconscious conditioning. But this freedom comes with responsibility. When you're no longer completely caught up in your own psychological drama, you naturally become more sensitive to the suffering of others and more capable of responding helpfully. Your presence becomes a gift to everyone you encounter, even if they're not consciously aware of it. People feel safer, more accepted, more seen when they're around someone who is truly present. The message of this book is ultimately one of hope. Despite all the challenges facing our world, despite the apparent dominance of ego consciousness in our political, economic, and social systems, a profound transformation is possible. It begins with individuals like you discovering their true nature as conscious presence and learning to live from this awareness. Every moment offers a new opportunity to choose presence over unconsciousness, acceptance over resistance, love over fear. You don't need to perfect this practice or achieve some permanent state of enlightenment. You simply need to keep returning to the present moment, again and again, with patience and compassion for yourself and others. As you integrate these teachings into your daily life, remember that the goal is not to become someone different, but to recognize who you already are beneath the layers of mental conditioning and psychological identity. You are not a separate individual struggling to find peace and happiness in a hostile world. You are consciousness itself, temporarily expressing through this particular human form, inherently peaceful and complete. The power of now is not just about experiencing pleasant present moments. It's about discovering that your essential nature is the very awareness in which all moments arise and pass away. This awareness is not born and does not die. It's not damaged by difficult experiences or improved by pleasant ones. It's the unchanging constant through all the changes of life. This recognition is not the end of your human experience, but the beginning of living as a human being who knows their true nature. You continue to have thoughts, emotions, and experiences, but you're no longer completely identified with them. You play your role in life fully and authentically, but you know that your deepest identity transcends any particular role. The transformation of human consciousness begins with your own awakening to the power of now. As you discover the peace and joy that exist in this moment, as you learn to respond to life from presence rather than reactivity, as you recognize the same consciousness in others that you've discovered in yourself, you become a beacon of the new consciousness that our world desperately needs. This is your invitation and your opportunity. Not someday in the future when conditions are better, but right now, in this moment, regardless of what's happening in your life or in the world. The doorway to transformation is always here. The power of now is always available. The time for awakening is always now. Thank you for joining us on this deep exploration of one of the most important spiritual teachings of our time. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to read Tolle's book directly and begin implementing these practices in your own life. Remember to subscribe to Legacy Book Insight for more transformative wisdom from the world's most influential books. Until next time, may you discover the profound peace and joy that exist in this eternal moment. Right here, right now. Thanks for watching.